welcome to Raccos Forum. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic, the Ontario Municipal Board. It's a discussion that has been taking place for many, many years. And of course there is at least two major discussions, one in favor, one against. And today we have two gentlemen whom Tom, who is a councillor in the town of Aurora, he will be speaking against the Ontario Municipal Board, and Joe, who represents as CEO the OHBA, the Homeowner Business Association or something, will be speaking, of course, in favor of the Ontario Municipal Board. So welcome, gentlemen, to Raccos Forum.
Thank you.
As I just said, it is a very hot discussion. I know that recently you had a major discussion in the city of Markham, where about 50 local politicians participated. Can you tell us what's happening on this topic?
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, we did, as you mentioned, we had the Municipal Summit, and we gathered the elected officials to discuss reform of the OMB. Right now, the feeling is that we bear, as municipality, we have all the responsibility, we bear all the costs, yet we have no authority when it comes down to it. And so it's a very frustrating experience dealing with the planning applications that come forward. And at the end of the day, the perception is there that as elected officials, no matter what decision that we make, it will eventually just be taken to the OMB, appealed, and overturned.
But if the decision that you make are within the legislation that you are given, then it shouldn't make no difference when it goes to the OMB. Is that fair, Joe, to say that? Or?
Well, I think the challenge is, as the councillor put it, is that decisions are being made locally.
Yes.
But are those local decisions consistent with provincial policy? And the whole point of the board is to provide a tribunal, administrative justice, as we like to refer to it, that looks at the application outside of the local politics and says, does it work within the provincial legislation? Because it is a provincial body, and so for our members, it really provides an opportunity to provide an application in a municipal, in any municipality, and really structure it around how the provincial policy works, and then have it tested against the legislation.
Tom, would you agree that if your council or any other council in the province of Ontario would follow what the provincial legislation gives you authority to, that at the OMB there shouldn't be a problem, or it wouldn't matter, in your opinion?
Well, the thought is that, I mean, with all due respect, Joe, our official plans that we put forward, we spend an incredible amount of money, resources, time putting together these official plans, and we do that while adhering to the provincial policy. The Places to Grow Act, we incorporate all of that, and at the end of the day, that is approved by the upper bodies, the region, in our case in Aurora, and also the province. And so in turn, we sit there and we have an official plan that is unique to our community and our municipality, yet when we look to uphold our plan, it is in turn turned around and appealed on the basis of that provincial policy. And considering that our plan is approved by the province, we feel that we should have that authority to uphold uphold that plan when any application that comes in is looking for amendments. And if we feel that it doesn't better our community, then we should have that authority because it is approved by the province.
Fair statement, Joe. I mean, if the province had approved the official plan that the municipality and the region has approved, then it should be within the law of the province. So how could there be a problem?
Well, I mean, the official plan process is as much a democratic process as it is a planning process. And so the real issue here is that the provincial legislation is based on planning law. And so when the councillor says it's been approved by the province, it's been approved by the province to be in conformity, which means that your official plan is consistent with the framework the province put out. But in terms of actually getting into the details of it, the province doesn't provide that kind of authority or approval. And that's really one of the shortcomings here, right? The shortcoming here is that the province is saying, yeah, your plan looks like it works within our box, but if someone wants to challenge it at the OMB and actually apply planning law to it, then it's open for that appeal. And I understand that struggle and frustration that a municipality goes through an official plan process, but even through that process, the development industry will provide examples of where they think the official plan is wrong. And sometimes that is seen as an adjustment to the official plan, and sometimes local council says, well, that's your opinion, but we think it's right. And that's where developers want to have the opportunity, should have the opportunity to take the OMB. No different than ratepayers. Ratepayers have the same reaction sometimes for official plan policies. If a municipality decides they're going to allow, stacked townhouses in a certain location, but the neighborhood doesn't agree with that, the councilors can all agree to it, but the ratepayers still have a right to take it to the OMB. So it sort of cuts both ways in terms of how that works.
I think the statement is a fair one, that in fact we always say that the ratepayers lose at the OMB because the developer are able to succeed, but there has been cases where the ratepayers were not happy with the local council decision, and they were able to bring the matter to the OMB and potentially succeeding. Under that scenario, probably the residents would be happy.
No, you know what, and definitely there is a need for an appeal body system,
Okay.
100%.
So you agree with the appeal? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. The fact that I've stated in my opinion, and actually coming out of the working group and the municipal summit, abolishment is not the way that municipalities want to go. We do see the need for that appeal body and for the OMB, but it's how it's structured. It needs to be restructured. And I believe Joe agrees to a certain extent that it does need to be restructured. And I think if all of us can work together and come up with a solution where, it's fair for all parties at the end of the day, because I think municipalities at the end of the day are just looking to have a bit of an authority to when it speaks to their official plans, and be able to uphold the vision that they've created and the identities of their communities.
Have you raised that issue with the Minister of Municipal Affairs?
Definitely have, and hopefully in the near future we'll be sitting down with them to discuss the outcomes of the summit and the thoughts of the municipalities and our recommendations.
Okay, so you have raised with him in a formal way or informally?
Through a letter and
So
speaking with deputies.
And the municipal summit that you helped organize, I thought we had a very healthy discussion around that.
Definitely.
I think that people can appreciate you're not going to abolish the OMB. Is there a way of modernizing it, or the way of making improvements to process, helping educate people in the process? Absolutely, there's always room for improvement. But there'll always be a need for an appeal mechanism somewhere that can take the politics out of that decision, apply some planning law. And if we don't agree on the planning law, then that's the work of the provincial government to make those adjustments. And I think what we're going to see is more conflict with the new growth plan coming forward. You're going to see more areas of conflict. The push for greater intensification in a place like York Region is going to lead to more conflict. So how do you work your way through that?
Well, let's have a little break, and when we come back, we will have a few more questions on this topic. Thank you. Welcome back to Raccos Forum. We are discussing the Ontario Municipal Board and what needs to be done to make the board more acceptable to the people, to the taxpayer of this province, and also to the development industry. Sometimes they also raise an issue. I'm happy, though, that on the first part, we seem to, both of you seem to agree that there is a need of a third party. There is a need of an adjudicator, someone that will be able to make a decision if the two groups don't agree. And so that's a good start, I would say. Now, the question, though, is who should that person be, and which kind of power should be given to those people? Any suggestions from any of you?
Go ahead. Okay. Well, first, and the thing that I think we're hearing the most from most municipalities is when it speaks to the powers of the OMB and what can be appealed and what can't, it goes back to that official plan. And it speaks to that when an application comes before us and is looking for amendments to that official plan, if the council doesn't see that benefit to the community and decide to reject that application, then that should not be allowed to be appealed due to the fact that it doesn't conform to the official plan. Okay. And that's part of that power that I think most municipalities are looking for, that authority to give back to the local municipalities.
But if it is allowed in the official plan, then there is no need for the owner of the property to come in front of council. If it is something which is allowed.
If there is something that's allowed within the OP, I would say that there might be some slight zoning issues that need to come before, and therefore there would still need to be a decision by council. But if council does approve that, because it falls within the guidelines, that also should not be appealable, because all they're doing is you're agreeing with the vision of the community. Where the difference falls is that if you deny an application that falls within your OP, so therefore in essence you are making a political decision, and you're giving into political pressure by residents, then yeah, that should be allowed to be appealed. So, but it's that aspect that if it doesn't conform to the OP, and council decides to not allow for those changes, which they've already instituted under Bill 73 for the first 2 years of a new OP, right? So, you know, I guess most municipalities are asking why just 2 years. It should that legislation should continue further on, and that's the authority that most councils are
Why
looking
didn't
for.
that happen, Joe? Right.
Well, I mean, again, the official plan is very much a political document as much as a planning document. That's just the reality, and those documents change over time. I mean, the real challenge, really, I think, for municipalities is that the provincial government changes the legislative structure every 10 years. Every 10 years there's a change, and you're left catching up. And we see municipalities who are, you know, they're responding to developer applications because our members are ahead of the game on this. They see the change in the provincial legislation, they see where the infrastructure is, and they're moving applications. And for communities, it's a little unsettling. And they're trying to figure out how do they respond to these changes. So we need OMB, we need adjudicative power, yes. Is there a way of improving that structure? As I always say, when people are unhappy with the decision, they fight the process. And in this case, the process is the OMB. They fight that process and they say, well, let's leave it to our councillors to make these community decisions. I can respect that, but I also need people to appreciate that the provincial government has set sort of this standard, this threshold, the law. So when you elect your provincial politicians, they're establishing really how your community is going to change over time, and our members are always going to look for an opportunity to bring applications forward that they think are consistent, and we'll need the OMB, we'll need an appeal mechanism. Are there opportunities to improve the process? Absolutely. Half of that is just sort of being, as I like to say, honest with residents. Things are changing in our communities, whether it's GO stations, highways, subways, things are changing and evolving, and the IOP sometimes gets stuck in this snapshot. This is how our community is going to look for the next 10 years. That's not really authentic to what happens. The 2-year freeze is something that we're struggling with as an industry, because it's a 2-year freeze on what? On a snapshot of how a municipality should look for the next 20 years? No. Things are changing. When the subway line comes in, when new GO stations are built, things are going to change. So it's a question of process. It's a question of collaboration. There's going to be conflict.
Right.
There's going to be conflict. There's probably going to be more conflict in the future. How do we get ourselves through it?
And so, and when there's conflict, there's always a wise thing to have is a third party that would be able to hear both arguments and potentially make some decision for them. You were saying?
Just to answer that question, I mean, yes, you know, municipalities need to be flexible within their OP, and the OP is in essence a living document that needs to be flexible and have some changes. But it comes back to that point that who should be given that authority to allow for that change within the community? It should be a municipal council, should it not? We're at the grassroots level. We know what the community vision moving forward is wanting. We set up that structure as far as where the intensification should go, and we adhere to all those policies from the province. And so we should have that authority at the end of the day.
But if you should have that authority, that means you would have to appoint that third party, or is that what you're suggesting?
No, we're suggesting that if all we're doing at the end of the day is upholding our official plan, we don't see how an application betters our community, or how it's going to increase, you know, whether it's value or whether it's business or whatnot moving forward. Well, then we should have that authority to be able to turn down that application without the fear of it going to the OMB. Because at the end of the day, that's always in the back of of an elected official's mind is that if I don't agree with this, even though I don't, and I don't think that this has value for our community, that it's just going to be appealed and my decision is going to be overturned. And
potentially, not all the time.
Not all the time, but potentially, because if you look at it, yes, under the province's guidelines, it fits, but under our official plan, it doesn't fit, right? And so at the end of the day, is that, you know, do we want to be a cookie-cutter province where it doesn't matter what municipality you're in, it all looks the same? Or do we want to keep that uniqueness and have our identities as communities still be there? I mean, we all buy places, right, to live due to the fact of, you know, I like the area, you know, the looks of it. It's got a certain character to it, and I think most people feel that that's being taken away by having a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think that's some of the frustration.
The other problem, though, is this, that costs are a very important factor in all the discussion. And one of the arguments that the province has been trying to do is to allow enough flexibility that costs to build a community are minimized, and to run it, most importantly, later on, are minimized. But if the province doesn't have some control on that and allow just the local municipality to make those decisions, then how is that going to be controlled? Because we have municipality that their tax rate is much higher than others, and the reason is that they are not able to attract the investments to make the difference. How would you answer to that? Oh, why don't we do this? So let's go for break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we'll try to answer the questions. We'll be back.
Thank you.
Welcome to Raccos Forum. When we broke on our second segment, we were talking about costs and the importance. One of the issues that the province seems to be arguing lately is that if we should allocate higher density where there is existing public transportation, because that makes our investment to go a little farther. Of course, if a municipality will be able to make changes significantly to what the province would like to see, that would make these investments a little less efficient. How are we going to be able to address that issue, where the province will be happy and the municipality will be happy?
Well, look, from a development perspective, we've long said that if you're going to have GO stations, subways, you need to build communities around those stations that support the ridership. And one of the frustrations we've had from a development perspective is the idea around pre-zoning. If you know the station is going to go there, why not pre-zone densities in the area so that the developer doesn't have to work through an application process? What we often get back from councils is that pre-zoning discussion really triggers some bad feelings with the existing residents who are not necessarily comfortable with the idea of just simply allowing 12 or 15 stories. So even though it makes planning sense, the local community still wants to have a say in terms of what it looks like and how it fits. Again, it goes back to a concern we have around the politics of how those decisions are made.
But there isn't a better way. If, in fact, we would approve the zoning in the official plan before people move in, and that doesn't happen in a new area, that can happen. Of course, that cannot happen where there is an existing community. But in the new area, if we do all the approval, official plan and zoning, prior to people moving in, wouldn't that eliminate most of the problems?
Well, in essence, that does. I mean, we have, I know in Aurora, we have a buyer's guide that goes out, and when it states in there about our official plan, and it says that this is the document that we adhere to, and for homeowners to do their due diligence and look at where they're buying and what can be built around them and what can't. And so what they're saying is look at that document. And once again, it goes back to that. I've always argued with our council and our staff is that do we apply that same logic to the development community when they come in? So when they're buying a piece of property, are they looking at it and saying, well, what's the official plan say? What's the zoning on that? What can I actually do within that framework? And I've always asked the question of anyone that comes forward with an application is did you read all that before you bought that property? And if you did, then why are you before us looking for changes? And if the answer is that well, I need to make money and it's got to be, the investment's got to be able to make money. Well, you know what? If you can't build it within our framework and our guidelines, well, then maybe you shouldn't have bought that property.
So that's a fair question. The developer should have known what was allowed and what he or she could build. Yeah. Why all of a sudden he or she wants to change it?
It's a great point, but I would say back to you again, the rules change every 10 years. So 10 years ago, that piece of property made sense looking one way. But now with 60% intensification, it doesn't make any more sense. Yeah, but now there's time for a change.
But that should be done by the city and by the province. It shouldn't necessarily be pushed by the developer.
Well, and so you've got the province in that case saying, okay, let's get the 60% intensification. By the way, let's put a GO station there where we're at it too. And then the expectation that for the development industry to sit back and wait 10 years until the city figures out what to do. It doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, for the residents and for the councilors in some cases, we're looking at that infrastructure and we're being encouraged by the province to intensify. So sometimes we find ourselves ahead of the council. Some of that's political, some of that's planning. And that's where the conflict's coming from. And that's where you look at a situation like that and you say, well, the official plan says A. Yeah, but there's a subway coming. When are you going to update the subway line? Well, maybe in 5 years. We're not going to wait. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, but how then, I guess the resident, Tom, would say, but how can I allow higher density until the subway comes? There's already a traffic problem. I mean, it makes sense that the developer cannot wait forever. But if that density can only come in after some infrastructure takes place, if that infrastructure is not in place, the other question is how can we allow that additional density to come into play?
Well, I think as municipalities, I mean, speaking from Aurora, we've identified certain areas within Aurora that we want that intensification to happen, which are, down our Yonge Street corridor, Wellington. Those are the areas that we want. And what we're finding is that the development community comes in and has a piece of property that's outside of that area, still within our built boundary, but outside of the area, and they use the provincial policy to say that, hey, they're looking for intensification, and those numbers, the 60% that they're going to be mandated to go now, they're going to say, well, you know what, you have a two unit per acre density over in this area, so because the province is asking for a high intensification, we should be allowed to do 8, 10 units per acre, and then we turn and say, well, no, that's not the area that we've identified, and that's the struggle, is that we're fixing and putting all that into how we're going to develop and use the province's policies and for that intensification, but yet we're fighting the ones that are outside of that area. If they come within that area, I think most councils, most elected officials have no problem approving those plans. I mean, to speak specifically to one, we had one at Yonge and Wellington for some townhomes, Treasure Hill, as you know, and that came forward. And while some of us weren't too thrilled with the commercial aspect not being there, we identified that that's within our intensification area, and that's what we, under our official plan, are asking for. So therefore, really, we're not going to say no to it. We just ask, can we tinker with it a little bit? And at the end of the day, is we heard that the viability of commercial is not allowed, like it wouldn't work. So therefore we said, well, you know what, we're going to allow this application because it is what we want. It is the vision.
So was council who went back and said, we are prepared to be a little more flexible, considering the reports that he presented to us.
Well,
so
because at the end of the day, it is the vision that we want.
Yeah,
so we feel comfortable moving forward. And we had residents come out and complain about that application.
Sure.
But yet we made the hard decision because that is what our official plan asked for. So we moved forward with that vision of the town.
And that's a great example. I mean, I guess what we always end up going back to is the role of the OMB is to deal with conflicts. And so when you get yourself into those conflicts, and a lot of those conflicts find themselves in established neighborhoods who are seeing a change. And they ask the question, why is this change coming? And in our experience, the change is led by provincial policy. It keeps changing over and over again, and municipalities are forced to catch up. And there's a real gap between that provincial change, the municipal work that has to happen, educating the residents, and the industry does find itself at the forefront of that, because they're reading all these things and making business decisions about what makes sense where. And that's where you get that conflict.
This discussion will never end for many years to come. It is, I want to say thank you to both Tom and Joe, because we had a good discussion about the OMB. I thank all those of you who are watching us, and together we will be able to make the changes necessary for the OMB. So I thank you again for participating. Hopefully more discussion will take place in the community, as it did already in Markham, so that people will appreciate better the issue that we are dealing with. There is no question that whatever we build, both as homeowner and as builder, it is for us, it is for our community, and so we better do the best thing that we can. I thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.